He was interested in protecting the honor of God. He did not want the honor to be passed down to somebody else. He wanted it to be said that it was the God of Abraham that made Abraham rich. So there are some times you find yourself that a place that somebody wants to help you, or a place that you are looking for job, you're looking for help, and you don't get it. There must be a reason. As a born-again Christian that knows that God has passion for you, God will not send you to anywhere that is going to take glory from Him. Everything God does is going to be clear and clean, that this can only be the hand of God upon your life. Abraham was conscious of man taking God's glory upon his life for himself. He knew that he was a product of the grace and the glory of God. He knew that he was the reflection of God's power. He was the reflection of God's grace. He was the reflection of God's glory. And he never wanted a man to steal it and to take it away from himself, thereby protecting the glory of God. Then we go into the relationship, how Abraham built his relationship with God. Further down, if you read the chapter 15, Abraham conversed with God and said, God, you have given me everything apart from the child. Who is going to be the heir? Is it my servant that is going to be the heir? And God now gave him the covenant, told him that he's going to not only father a child, he's going to be a father of many nations. And God went further to tell Abraham what will happen to his descendants in the land of Egypt. And God gave Abraham the assurance that even though his descendants will end up in the land of Egypt, that they are going to be rescued. And the Bible says Abraham believed, and God counted it to him as righteousness. Then we further read to chapter 22, where Abraham was tested by God, and God asked Abraham to give his son, to sacrifice his son Isaac. But people always talk about how Abraham did not argue. He went and sacrificed his son Isaac like that. He was ready to kill Isaac. But this did not happen overnight. If you go through from the beginning, if you go through the scriptures from the beginning, you find out that Abraham was used to constantly believing in God. He developed that relationship with God. So when God told him to sacrifice his son, he knew that there must be something about it. He did not argue, he did not question God, because he has already been doing that all through his life. Abraham knew the character of God. He knew that there must be a reason, because in all through his life, in building the relationship with God, he has understood the character and the mind and the passion of God. So all these things does not happen overnight. It takes time. It takes practice, it takes time, it takes relying on God, trusting the Lord, believing on what He says. You have to practice putting everything. You have to practice casting your cares upon the Lord, so that when the time of trials and tests come, you are going to pass it with flying colors, because you already believe in God. You have developed that relationship with God. And let's look at David. David was known as a man after God's heart, and he captured God's passion for him through his humility, his obedience, his relationship with God, and his love for God. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, David told Saul in verse 37 that the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. David had faith in God. He knew that all the wild animals he killed when he was a shepherd, the wild animals that were coming to attack his sheep, he knew that it was not by his power, but by God. He had faith. He knew that it was the grace of God upon his life that made it possible for him to kill all those wild animals. And he knew that that same grace of God upon his life would help him to eliminate Goliath. David developed a relationship with God such that when David sinned and Prophet Nathan came to him and told him about his sin and counseled him, he fell on his knees and apologized and asked for forgiveness and repented. If you read Psalm 51, that is a psalm by David when he had a contrite heart and was asking God for forgiveness and repenting of his sins. David was a pure worshiper. He worshipped God. He loved worshiping God, such that his worship touched God's heart. And the relationship between God and David was close and very, very intimate. If you read through the book of Psalms, the Psalms written by David, you are going to understand the relationship between God and David.